We will be talking about why Reshma Saujani's Marshall Plan for Mums is long overdue. Since the pandemic began, over 2 million women have left the workforce, and with the closures of daycares and schools, the care of children has largely fallen on the shoulders of women. But motherhood isn't a luxury, it's a job, argues Reshma. Reshma is also the founder and CEO of Girls Who Code. We're going to be discussing why mothers should be considered essential workers and how the Marshall Plan for Mums could stimulate the economy, and why it's time to put our dollar figure on the unseen, unpaid labour of mothers. Reshma, hi, welcome. It's great to see you.
Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
Great, thank you. And thank you for being here today. Whereabouts are you? Are you in New York?
I am in New York City, praying that the construction outside my window doesn't pick up again. So
don't worry, we'll be fine. So let's get started. For those that aren't familiar with Marshall Plan for Mums, Reshma, can you just give us some context? Tell us more about it. What is it? Where did the idea come from?
Yeah, so moms are getting crushed in this pandemic, and we've lost over 2 million jobs. Our labor market participation is where it was in 1989. So think about that. Like in less than 9 months, we lost 30 years of progress. And that's terrifying. Twice as many Black and Latina women have lost their jobs. So we are literally in a national crisis. And there's two main reasons why that's happened. One, the instability of schools has really demonstrated that like the foundation of our childcare in our country is broken, right? And so many of us are operating as nannies, as tech support, as cooks, as now, homeschooling, all the while we're trying to maintain our full-time jobs. Some of us are fortunate enough to work from home, but many of us don't have that. And so when daycare shut down and schools shut down, so many women had to leave the workforce or take the third shift or go on food stamps or move in with their parents. The second reason why you're seeing this kind of women being pushed out of the labor market is because so many of us found ourselves in jobs that weren't pandemic proof, like education, healthcare, retail. Many of these jobs are simply not coming back. So I believe that we need a 360 plan, a Marshall Plan for moms. And this really is focused on four main things. One, we need monthly short-term payments for mothers. When I think about when the schools closed down in New York City, the mayor thought about the HVAC equipment, he thought about teachers, but he never thought about me. He never thought, well, it was this 1950s sensibility. Well, somebody at home will log on the kids at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and 11 o'clock and keep their jobs. So I need them to put a value on my labor, a cost, an economic cost of what the labor market, effect is of me having to leave my job to homeschool my kids. Secondly, we need to pass policies like paid leave and affordable daycare. The United States is one of the only countries, left that, operate with such a broken care structure. It's got to change. And finally, we have to retrain women for the jobs of tomorrow. Those jobs aren't coming back. And so many moms here in America, we can't afford to not work. It's not a choice. And so if we are going to, again, shorten that economic recovery, we're going to have a plan that includes retraining.
And it's interesting because we talked yesterday about this third shift, and the second shift was already tough.
Bad enough, right?
It's bad enough, and then you're layering on this third shift. Tell us, what exactly does the stimulus entail? It's a monthly payment, but what's the proposal?
Yeah, so right now in the proposal, there's a child care tax credit for families. I would say that it's a down payment on the Marshall Plan, but in and of itself, it's not good enough. I think that there's not a lot of faith that, paid leave is going to get through this relief bill. And then for childcare, we are, kind of bailing out the daycare industry, right? That needs to be bailed out. And at the same time, offering a tax credit for low-income families to help pay for childcare. So I think that, where the Biden administration is at is great. I am really proud to announce that Congresswoman Grace Meng introduced a resolution in the House for a Marshall Plan for moms. Today, I think right now on the Senate floor, Senator Duckworth and Senator Klobuchar are introducing a Senate resolution for a Marshall Plan for moms. So this is incredible. incredible. And so many state legislators across the country, because part of it is acknowledgement that moms are bearing the brunt of the pandemic. 700,000 women actually without children gained jobs. So this really is about mothers, who are being affected in this moment. And so we have to keep the focus on them and to really think about what are the things that they actually need to get back to work.
And you rightly point out that like this isn't rocket science, and actually there's a lot of countries, the UK included, that have already got things like this in place. What would you say to people that argue that it's against the sort of capitalist structure, and how will this actually stimulate the economy?
Yes, Juliet. I mean, Estonia does it. Estonia loves their moms. Like, it's quite remarkable actually where we sit in this conversation. It's been so interesting, Juliet, because I've gotten a lot of pushback on the right and the left. So on the right, it is, well, motherhood's a choice and you chose to have kids, so deal with it. And, the response is, we didn't choose for the schools to close. Like, we didn't choose to be in the center of a global pandemic. And so it's really like a pushback against any government policies that are going to help support families. And so we really have to, have a conversation about the morality and the values in our country. And it's interesting, on the right, they want to regulate our bodies, but they don't want to help us when we have children. And that dichotomy, that contradiction has always been there. On the left, it's this perception that, well, if we focus on moms, that's not good for gender equality. And that we really have to talk about this in terms of caregiving and parents. And of course, it's like, what about the dads? And it's like, well, what about the dads? Because 3 mothers have lost their jobs, for every 1 father. And dads say that too. Just last week, we released, a campaign with 50 prominent dads saying, we need a Marshall Plan for moms. The dads get it too, right? That we're the ones that are bearing the brunt of this. And look, here's the other, and there's this really sense of uncomfortability about payment for, unpaid labor. And we have to really think about, why is that making us feel uncomfortable? See, my thing is like, so many of us, and I think the moms who are watching this can agree with me, we can't even call this unseen labor, because our husbands sat there with us and they watched us do an extra load of laundry. They watched us homeschool the kids. They watched us do everything while we maintained our full-time jobs. And the reason why it didn't change what was happening at home is because that work is not valued. That work is not respected. And so if we start respecting that work, or we start valuing that work, maybe that's how we're going to get to gender equality.
And you talked about what the Biden administration is doing, and there's progress there. But what actions can we all take to make this plan a reality? And yesterday, Ronan Dunn, the CEO of Verizon Consumer, opened with talking about actually how they didn't furlough anyone, and they funded childcare, no questions asked. Clearly, not every business can afford to do that, but what are some of the steps that private sector can take to support this plan?
So look, we need a Marshall Plan for Moms task force in every single company. And, there's an opportunity to tap into our populist mom rage, and they're terrified of us. And if you think about it, Dr. Mason used to say this, like, when the millennials came to the workforce, we got ready for them. We got the bean bags out, we got the popcorn, we got the pinball machines. Nobody prepared for the moms. And now we're coming back to the workforce, and I want to know what you're going to do to support me and what those levers that you're going to pull are. So to me, I want more flexibility. I want to be supported with remote working, and I don't want that to be actually, and I want to root out the motherhood penalty. I am just skeptical. We faced a motherhood penalty before this. We had to hide our kids. Now you've seen my kids on my Zoom screen. And the reality is like, are you like, I got to hire a mom? Or are you like, I got to hire that single guy over there? They're going to hire the single guy. And so we have to make our voices really loud. And, what I mean by that is like the way that we do performance management should change. I should not be evaluated as a mother who is literally making sure that this country functions. You know what I mean? The same way someone who doesn't have kids is. And it's okay to say that, because we're shouldering, especially because I don't believe the schools are going to open full time in the fall. And so we're going to be dealing with this again, sorry, in some version of this. So I think that like we have got to demand that workplaces support us as essential workers in this moment, and be unabashed about that. And that means we have to find our bravery muscle, and we have to get the courage to demand. We are so good at fighting for everybody else. We're so good at fighting for our kids, but we never ask for something for ourselves. And now's the time. We've earned it. We've earned it.
I agree as a mother.
Yeah. And listen, here's the thing, Juliet. I think that I started this pandemic just grinning and bearing it. I can't take it anymore. I'm at my wit's end. Like, I need help, and I need to be seen. See me. Like, and I think that that is what mothers are crying out for. It's just see me, see my value, and support us. And yeah.
It's amazing how many people I've spoken to this week, how many women I've spoken to, and how many senior women I've spoken to that have said exactly the same thing, that it's like, enough, I'm at breaking point, I can't keep going.
Enough. And I get it, as igniting this movement, I have been shocked at how much pushback I've gotten just by identifying as a mom. Like, as if we're not getting, we're not bearing the brunt of this pandemic, and as if we don't have a right in this society to demand something for ourselves. And so you have to fight for it. That's what I realized. There is no sympathy, there is no empathy, there is no policy making that is happening that has us in mind. They can't even say the word mother. And so, to me, we have got to take, and I know we're tired, but we have to tap into that anger and demand it.
And that's there was a number of male advocates, male and fathers, that came out last week, as you said. Scott Galloway was one, Andrew Yang was one.
Steph Curry.
Which is amazing. How significant was and is that? And just talk a bit more about the other benefits that extend beyond mothers to get this in place.
Absolutely. Listen, I think if you build motherhood back better, that creates a structure for everybody. Like a structure of care for everybody. Like I feel this way, like a grocery code. You always designed, for your most vulnerable community. So if you're designing a care system for a caretaker that is a mother, that is going to uplift and benefit everybody. And so I think that, and I also think that so many men recognize that the weight has been borne on us and that the structure is broken. And so much, sometimes the response to this is, well, you just got to get your husbands and your partners to do more. Really? Like, now I have another job? No, society is broken, right? Because we, again, have not valued this work. And so that has to change. And I think men are standing alongside with us, interestingly, demanding more for us too. And I think that is, again, an opportunity. Never waste a good crisis. We've been fighting for these issues for 40, 50 years. The last time we did anything in childcare was in 1990. So we have an opportunity. And so going back to what people can do, I think most people on this, in this conference probably didn't get fired up about paid leave, or probably don't get fired up about childcare, aren't marching for childcare, right? Aren't wearing the, we're wearing the feminist t-shirt. We're not wearing the mom's t-shirt. It's time for that to change. You know what I mean? And that we have to actually demand. That was me snapping at my husband, really? You know what I mean? It's time for that to change, right? We have to basically get really fired up about these policies and to call our legislators and to vote on them our lives depend on it, because you know what? They do.
And I'd want to address a comment in the chat, actually, from Martina, because she was saying, how do we avoid the echo chamber? I know that there are probably 60-40 women, men on this conference, and actually, whilst it's called Women and Worth, there are a lot of men in the community. So I know there's a lot of guys that have tuned into this as well. Question on the other thing I want to say is we've also got a session on the motherhood penalty later.
Yeah.
Solving for that with the co-founders of The Second Shift, Gina and Jenny. And so we'll be talking a bit more about this. There's a couple of questions that have come in. Cynthia just commented, we've hired employees from the mumproject.org, putting mums back to work.
Yeah, we need internships, right? There's so many great ideas. Look, and I think on the echo chamber, Last week, Jerome Powell, of the Fed said that we got to do something about daycare. And I think we all fell out of our chairs. Like, you've never heard that before. And I think continuing to tie it as an economic issue is really important. And, constantly pushing the men in our lives to stand up. I intentionally built a campaign, and I literally went through my Rolodex and was like, and you, and you, and you, and you, and you. And I think that we have to do that. As we are fighting for this, it is not just moms fighting for it, but it's everybody in our family fighting for moms. That is the difference.
And I think there's a question here around it's making, Linda said, it makes me uncomfortable because we already have spent trillions of dollars and we cannot continue to have higher national debt, which is over 28 trillion already. Who will pay for this in the future when most people cannot afford higher taxes at this time? But I think there is a long and short term view on this. And yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, the fact that people can't afford daycare, that is something society should actually provide. If we want people to work, I mean, there was just an article that came out today, 300,000 less births. People are not having kids. We don't have kids. We don't function, and it's happening. There is a decline. I mean, come on. Every young woman probably looks at me in my organization and is like, oh man, wow, mothers are not respected. And it is having it's going to have a disastrous effect on our country. And so if we are a country that actually wants people to procreate, wants people to have children, we have to support them. And there are going to be savings, from that investment. It is an investment, right? And there are going to be savings from that investment.
And talk to us about where you are in advocating for this plan. You mentioned today it's being discussed in the administration. What steps now need to happen?
Yeah, so, we are definitely pulling the levers on the federal and the state front in terms of, again, having people focus on the plight of moms and come up with some real solutions. And I do think that we have an opportunity to rebuild the care structure and rebuild affordable childcare. And so continuing to shine the light on that and to have the conversation about unpaid labor. Unpaid labor is not accounted for in the GDP. 75% of the housework is done by mothers, and it comes at a tremendous cost. And so again, igniting this conversation and having this conversation is really critical. I think the second, place where we're really focusing on is what can the private sector do, in this moment? And in terms of what are the policies that they're going to offer, and really pushing them to start preparing for how are they going to hire, how many mothers have you lost? What's your plan on hiring them back? What's your plan on supporting them? Let's just say the schools don't open up 5 days a week in the fall. What are you going to do to support mothers? How are you changing your performance management? How are you offering flexibility? How are you allowing some of these decisions to be pushed down so managers can actually make these decisions? So there's a lot of different ideas that we have, and we're going to put together, Marshall Plan for Moms kind of toolkit for private, for companies to really think about what they can do. Thirdly, I'm going to start organizing moms everywhere. And I mean the moms in my PTA, right? I'm not talking about those of us who have, go to a march every Sunday, right? I'm talking about those of us who have not really been thinking about this. And to me, it's not just politically organizing them, because I see this as an issue that's on the left and the right. Whether you are a Republican or a Democrat, you should care about this. But I also think I'm worried about the mental health of mothers right now. I'm worried about us just surviving throughout the day and not feeling like we're so isolated and like we're the only ones. And so we have to start building community with one another. And the thing is that mothers have the least amount of time. And so, I think, again, the sense of I'm not crazy, I am not the only one, there are resources out there for me, is really important. And again, doing something with that fury and turning it into hope is critical.
I couldn't agree more. And what actions can we take? You mentioned that the unrecognized labor. What actions can we take to make motherhood a more equal playing field in terms of finances and recognition of work?
Look, I mean, I do think there are things that you can do in your home, right? First of all, which again, I just, sometimes my husband's supposed to do the nights, I do the mornings. I just leave at 6, even though I have nowhere to go. I walk the streets because it's I just have to change behaviors in my home and change my behaviors and my desire to kind of just want to do things, and have a constant conversation, with my partner about, what work is being seen and what work's not being seen. Again, in terms of the finances, this is something that I'm really learning about and digging into, right? In terms of like, what is the impact of this work actually not being valued? And again, I think you see it, like the reason why so many women cut back their hours or took the third shift is because we were already underpaid and undervalued. And so like when these choices are being made of like who's going to actually step back from their careers, or it's us. And that means, again, the entire system is broken and needs to be fixed.
And last question, Reshma. I'm reading the chat. There's so many interesting comments coming through. Someone was asking about, for women that are actually in terms of mental health and well-being, but they don't want to step away from the industry that they're in because they're scared of staying relevant. What advice would you give there?
Listen, I mean, I get it. I just stepped down from me. I mean, in 3 weeks, I'm not the CEO of Girls Who Code anymore. And I made that decision probably at the most craziest time I possibly can, because I have no time to have a midlife crisis. I don't even have a second, right, to think about what I want to do next, because I have like a 1-year-old screaming and a 6-year-old, right? And, it's a lot. But so I think I do always said to me, like, my only job at this moment was to keep myself alive and keep my children alive. Right? I didn't need to, focus on leaning into my career. In fact, I needed to focus on leaning out. And so don't put that pressure on yourself. But to the extent that, this moment has inspired you to think about, like, for me, it has, which is why I made the biggest change of my life, is like, who do I want to be? What do I want to do? What do I want my days to look like? What world do I want to leave my children? And like, to the extent you have moments to do that, maybe this is the time to get out of the job that you shouldn't be in, or the marriage you no longer want to be in. Maybe that is a job to be opportunity to be braver, but only if you're ready and only if you're there. And so I do think our mental health is really at risk. We are so worried about children and the increasing suicide rates. If the schools don't open in the fall, you know what I'm worried about? Suicide rates of mothers. Because you can't function this way. And again, I have support. I have help. I can work from home. I have some amount of childcare. So many mothers just don't. And if I am collapsing every day into my bed, exhausted, tired, have literally nothing left for myself, what about the rest of the moms that are barely living on minimum wage and don't have that same support? And so we have got to also, as we talk about, because we're all about the economics, we're all about the jobs loss, we're all about, but we need to also talk about the mental health consequences, on women and on mothers. And we're so good at hiding our shame. We think it's shameful. We thought it's shameful to go to the doctor if we have if something's wrong with us, much less take the time to deal with our mental health. It is the first thing to go. And so we have to for those of us, who are leading that conversation, thank you. And we have to keep having this conversation, keep talking about it.
Reshma, thank you so much. I think the work that you're doing is incredibly important and it's so powerful. I love the message about focusing on leaning out, not in, reinventing and rethinking the childcare system. And I think for us all, rethinking the benefit and the economic benefit of putting more awareness on unpaid labour and supporting mothers in this country. So a huge thank you to you. Would love to see the private sector toolkit that you're creating as well for the Marshall Plan for Mums. We'll share the link as well to the Marshall Plan for Mums in this chat, but a huge thank you again, and wishing you nothing but the best of luck over the next few months.
Thank you. And thank you for everything that you're doing.